Welcome to the Moon Manifesting Podcast. I'm Kyra Howearth, your host. Here on the show, we talk all about manifesting your dreams with the power of the moon so you can use the cosmic energy to transform your life. Welcome to the Moon Manifesting Podcast. Today we have a very special guest joining us for her second time on the Moon Manifesting Podcast. We have Kathryn Hocking, who is a business astrologer from South Australia, and she's going to be talking to us today about her beautiful Business Astrology Oracle Deck. It is absolutely gorgeous, but we're also going to be talking about something that's really important, and that is the importance of having the correct time for your chart, whether that's a business chart or natal chart. We've had a few, both of us have had some instances recently where the time just hasn't been right. And we're going to be talking a bit about that today. So Kath is a teacher of astrology, and she takes students on a journey through deepening their understanding of astrology and business astrology in her online courses, masterminds, and trainings, and everything else that she offers. And Kath is a Sagittarius Sun, Cancer Moon, and Virgo Rising. So as a Sagittarius Sun, she is a natural teacher who goes deep into the topics of her passions. She's quite empathic with the Cancer Moon shining through, very sensitive and intuitive. And as a Virgo Rising, she's very detail orientated. And I see that a lot in her trainings. Like, she goes right into the details. So it kind of feels very aligned to be talking about the importance of having that exact birth time here in the podcast. So with that little introduction done, welcome, Kath. It's so glad that you're here today.
Thanks so much for having me again.
Yes, it's a pleasure. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the importance of having the correct time for your business chart and natal chart. So, Kath, I wonder if you want to start off by telling us a bit about your business chart journey. I know a bit about what happened, but if you want to share for our listeners, that would be amazing.
Sure. So, I guess the first thing is when I started my business, I hadn't really rediscovered astrology at that point in time. So, it's certainly not something I was conscious of to write down the date and time and really record any of those details. These days, when big things happen in my business, I'm always noting down the precise timing, but I really didn't back then. So I had to rely on my memory, which can be faulty, as I learned, and also then rely on what information I could find. So I studied astrology, then I really realized I wanted to really develop the field of business astrology, which hadn't really been particularly well developed, at the time. And so part of that was creating a business chart for my business. And so I thought about, when would that timing be? And the way I teach it in my programs is that it's a little bit different to when a person is born. There is kind of an absolute date and time when a person's born. With a business, my view is that it can be very different, because not all businesses become fully registered companies. Businesses operate in different ways. And so, what I really decided in the way that I teach business astrology is that what's most important is when it feels energetically significant and resonant for you. And that can really vary. But when I fell into it, when it really felt significant as like the birth of the business that I have now, was when we signed documents in my accountant's office to incorporate into a company. So that felt like it was really like a new business being born, from having just been a sole trader initially, but to bringing my husband on as a silent director and incorporating. It just felt like this really big moment. And I can remember, or I thought I could remember, that we went out and we celebrated afterwards. And so I thought, okay, that feels like it. So to then find the date, this was years after it had happened. So firstly, I went back through my Google Calendar to try and find that appointment at the accountant's office. And then I checked my emails. And what I actually noticed was that we had actually had that meeting booked in And then I think I got sick or something and we had to reschedule it. So even the date that was showing in my calendar wasn't actually the date that the meeting ended up happening. So I had worked that out initially, and then my memory told me that we went in, we signed the documents, my husband and I, and then we went straight out to dinner afterwards and had a glass of champagne and celebrated. So that is like what my brain was very much telling me happened. So I had this memory, and so I went by that. So I think I got the date right, but I got the time in for about 4 p.m. in the afternoon or something like that. I was pretty sure that was it based on my memory. I tried to go back to when I had posted an Instagram photo, but at the time I couldn't work out how to actually get the time off an Instagram photo. And so anyway, I trusted my memory. I thought, this is it, no worries. Went on my way. And so I worked with that business chart for quite a few years. And it was actually only this year I've been writing chapters for my book that I'm writing on business astrology. And I was writing the chapter about, creating your business chart and finding the time. And I thought, I'm just going to go back and see if I can't find that photo that I posted, because I knew that we posted this photo after we'd signed the documents. I took a photo of the documents on the table, and as the accountant went out to photocopy them, I'm pretty sure anyway, this is what my memory tells me, is as the accountant went out to photocopy them, I took a photo and I posted onto Instagram in the moment. And this time I actually Googled, how do I actually get the time of something you posted on Instagram? And I found out there actually was a way to do it. And when I did that, I actually did it via my Facebook account. It turned out the time was 11:53 a.m. in the morning. So I had that chart out by over 4 hours, which, if you're a bit of an astrology buff, you'll know that has significant impact on the chart. It changes the signs that your angles are in. It can potentially change the sign of your moon, certainly changes the houses that different planets are in. So it was quite a shock. But I think I was actually meant to discover it when I discovered it, because I'm writing this book that really, once a book's out there, it's out there in basically the same format forever. And the same, sometimes people do revised editions and stuff, but I feel like I was meant to discover it before this book gets put out into the world and published. But it was quite a shock, because it really changed my chart quite significantly. So yeah, it's super important to really do the homework to check these things.
That's right. And not just go by memory. Like, as good as we feel our memories are, it's so good to have some sort of way to actually look back and be like, oh, that's actually the exact date and time that this happened. Because even I guess, and I'll talk a bit about this in a bit, but even our mothers, when we're asking for our time of birth, you'd think that they would remember, oh yes, that's right, you were born at such and such time. But we're both mothers. We know, when you have a baby,
I remember what time mine were born.
That's right. You just don't remember that information, unless you've got it written down or some other way recorded, it can just be lost. And our memory might trick us. We may think it was a different time.
Yeah, I had a client yesterday, actually, or maybe a couple of days ago, and she signed up for my certification and she didn't know her birth time. So I said, oh, do you have any idea around what time it would be? And she said, oh, about 10 a.m. So then I started asking some questions that I ask if I'm thinking about rectifying a chart. And really the answers weren't obvious answers for the time that her mum said it was around. And I actually think the time could potentially be out by 2 hours or more either way. So again, what her mother or family members, their recollection could be, completely out. So you really can't just rely on that.
Yeah, so true. So true. So going back to your business chart. So your business chart, even though it was it was the same day as you had it previously, but now your new chart, it's, like you said, about 4 hours or a bit over 4 hours earlier in the day. So obviously that's changed all the house positions. It's changed the ascendant, the descendant, all those things. So like knowing like in business astrology just how important it is like to know like your descendant, for example, because that's like your soul clients, like all this stuff has shifted. So did you ever have times with your previous business chart where you're like, oh, this doesn't quite feel right? Or did you just kind of take it like, oh, this is my business chart, this has got to be right? Like, did you ever kind of feel that it was a bit off?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I necessarily felt it was off because I tend to just trust that it is what it's meant to be.
Yeah.
But there were things that I had to find a way to explain because they didn't make sense. Like in the first chart, I had Saturn in the 12th house, which, typically planets in the 12th house in business charts they're often either hard to express through the business, they're a bit restrained or constricted. And if we look at the things that Saturn rules in business, it is things like structure and discipline. It's having good reputation and recognition for your business. And I'm good at all of those things, and therefore the business is good at all of those things. So it didn't really make sense for me to have a 12th house Saturn. I also had a packed 7th house in Gemini in the business chart. And again, like I'm definitely, I've got my partnership with Hay House now, but one-on-one work certainly isn't like the work that I feel I'm most meant to do through the business. And, partnerships haven't been the biggest part of my business. So I was kind of like, oh, how do I interpret this? So it's not that I necessarily felt it was off, but there were a few things that I struggled a bit to work out how that applied to my business. But then equally, then when I got the new chart, there were some placements where I was just like, oh, hold on. I've been saying that I'm not meant to run retreats in my business because that's not aligned. And now suddenly Jupiter and Venus are in the 12th house. And,
Oh, wow.
so like there was this, as you would know with your own chart time issue, there was a bit of that identity crisis of
Yeah.
what I've been telling myself isn't actually true. And what do I do with that information now, And even my courses, I've had to go back and re-record different trainings where I'm talking about my business chart. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is why it's best to be sure, like right up front on this sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I guess like going back a step as well for like anyone who's listening and they're like, oh, okay, a business chart, how do I actually pick that right time? What are some things that might be like the timing of like the birth of the business? So for you, it was when you like switched over to a company structure and you like signed all the paperwork there at the accountant. So like for you, that felt quite big and important. But what are some other things that people might look for as their business birth time?
Yeah, so it really can vary. Sometimes it's registering a business name. And so with that, you often will have like an email confirmation of that. So that gives you good timing information. It might be the date and time that you pressed like go live on your website. That could feel like when the business was real, when like you went to the URL and there's a website there. And again, you could probably get that data from your web host or even in the back end of your website potentially. For some people, it's when they sold their first product or service. Because even for me, I can remember that being a big deal the first time. I had worked in my business for months before I got a sale. So when I got that first, this is years ago in a different business, but when I got that first sale, that was like a really big moment. So for other people, it might be, they might have woken up in the middle of the night with this bolt of insight, or they might have been in the shower and they had this amazing idea come through. So this is why it's hard, because I don't think it's one size fits all. I think you really have to spend the time tuning into, when did your business feel real? Like when did it feel like a real thing? And that varies for everyone.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. That is definitely true. And it does make it tricky. Like when making a business chart, like I know when I've made my own business charts, like it's always been a journey of, okay, what was that actual first thing I did? Did I post on Instagram first, or did I buy my domain name, or what was it? So I guess, yeah, trying to narrow that down, and then finding that exact time is really important. And then if there's a few different things, you've got to find which thing happened first as well.
Yeah. The other
Um,
thing I'd really love to mention here is like the business that we created an entity in 2015 isn't the business I have now. And what I really want to say is it's really important that you don't keep creating new charts every time you either go in a different direction in your business or launch a new service. Because here's the way you need to think about it. We don't give babies a new birth date every time they like learn to walk or they start talking or they go to school, right? It's the same birth chart the whole way through life. Businesses are the same. And so I think it can be really tempting to start writing charts for every single different thing in your business. But it's really important to pick that birth chart and then stick to it. And it's about helping your business grow and evolve, but it still has that original birth chart as its core energy.
yeah, that's definitely true. Yes, that's really insightful. Thank you, Kath. So I wanted to chat a bit about my own story with my natal chart, because I recently was at my mother's house and I was like snooping around in my old baby albums. And I got the shock of my life when I found written down in my baby photo album that my time of birth was actually 5 minutes earlier than what I had been using for my natal chart. And it was only 5 minutes. And I was like, oh, maybe it's not going to make that much difference. But anyway, I put it into my astrology software and it made a bit of a difference. The most important thing that I found was that my moon moved from my 11th house to my 12th house. And there was a few other little things that, I guess aren't that great in the scheme of things. Like my rising sign was still the same. A lot of my other house placements were still the same. It was just the moon sign.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I, came to terms with, oh yeah, moon in the 12th house, actually, that really suits me. That makes a lot more sense than moon in the 11th house. I do really love my alone time and that sort of thing. But then, so my mom was actually away at the time and I was house sitting. And then she came back and I was like, oh, well, guess what I discovered while you were away? And she was like, well, actually, both of those times were wrong. You were born at 12 past. So so the time I found was 10 past 3. I had always gone with 3:15, but she said from her memory, she remembered it was actually 12 past 3. And I was like, well,
But
what
again,
one do I use?
can you trust the memory so long ago?
That's right. So anyway, I put in 12 minutes past 3 and that made just enough difference to bring my moon back into my 11th house. So I guess my chart's basically back to how it was, except there's just those few little discrepancies with the exact degrees and that sort of thing, which I mean, to me, it makes a world of difference, but to anyone else, they'd just be like, oh, whatever, you're still the same person.
My question would be, have you done any rectification work on those? Because you would actually be able to tell. So if you looked at solar arcs, lining solar arcs up with major life events, you could probably work out which of those times it is.
Yeah.
Just
that's
because,
cool.
like, again, your mum's memory, mine from only, 7 years before was iffy. So,
Yeah.
so it would
That's
be
right.
possible to actually look into that. But yeah, super interesting.
Yes.
Now had 3 different times that you thought it was.
That's right. And like for me, I just really found that, like, I mean, when I've got clients coming to me and sometimes they don't know their birth time, like, I do a bit of rectification, but like I'm a Gemini, like I just kind of do a rough rectification. It's like, oh, that will do. It makes you an Aquarius rising. That fits. Don't look too closely at the degrees and that sort of thing. But this has really just taught me like how important it is to make sure you've got that exact minute, because just that difference of 5 minutes made a huge difference to my chart. And I guess if you do have planets that are close to the cusp of a house or something like that, like it can shift things quite a lot. So yeah, I guess like going back to business charts as well, like do you feel it's really important to have that exact minute? Like can we kind of just roughly guesstimate, or do we need to be like really exact to the minute? Like what do you feel there, Kath?
It's a really good question. And like, I don't want to stop people from exploring a business chart because they don't feel like they have the exact time. But I think people just need to be aware that certain things will not be fully reliable. And those are things like the signs of the angles, the moon placement, as you've noted, because the moon moves quite quickly. And then generally house positions as well, particularly if planets are close to house cuffs. I probably would say that it's less important for the exact time than an actual person being born. And again, I would go back to finding a time that's energetically significant to you that you can actually ideally narrow in with some sort of email confirmations. I mean, we live in a data-driven world, right? There are a lot of ways to find out timing of things, particularly relating to business activities. So where possible, get as close as you can. I feel like with my business chart, the way I like to think of it is that I thought it was that time for the period of time that I thought it was that time for a reason, and that I actually needed to see that version of my chart at that stage of my journey. And I feel like then I was meant to see the real chart, when I was writing my book, because I needed to, for the reasons I said, I needed to get everything in that book, or need to get everything in that book absolutely on point, right? And also I'm stepping into like a new level in my business. So I kind of think that when we get times wrong in birth charts, or even if we're using a chart and then we worry if it's the wrong time, I believe in fate and destiny, and that we end up working with whatever chart we're meant to work with. So I think ultimately it comes down to trusting yourself and trusting that you wouldn't be directed to the wrong chart.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually really nice, and really reaffirming that, like, even if you have like used the wrong chart for years and then you find your correct birth time or business birth time, that it's all meant to be and it's all part of your journey. I guess just like it's been part of our journeys, finding our correct times. So yeah, that's actually a really beautiful thought. So I guess one last sort of question about like birth times and that sort of thing, and then we're going to chat a bit about your deck. If we don't have a written record of our birth time, what sort of things would you suggest to someone there? And I guess this also can apply to a business birth time, but I guess like as our natal charts, what are your suggestions there for people who may not have that written record?
This can be really tricky, and it depends a lot where you live. So similarly to you, I got my birth time from baby birth books that I found. I've told my mum I went rummaging. She's not that happy about it, but I said, I knew that when you died, you would have no idea where this stuff was. So I just decided I was going to go find it. And I did find my baby birth book, and my birth time is written there. And so I'm just trusting that whoever wrote that there was accurate with it, right? It has my birth weight and time and, a whole lot of other details. So I do actually think that those baby birth books, the books from hospitals, are probably the most reliable information, particularly for people our age and older. That's where you're most likely going to find it. Some countries will put them on birth certificates. They don't in Australia. So again, it really depends on your country and how they record this information. I believe in the UK, there are some astrologers that are fighting really hard to get it to be something that is recorded officially in the UK. So this could change over time. But I would be looking for those, any sort of written birth records. And typically most hospitals has some sort of little book where they record details of the child's birth. I've got them from when I had my children with all of that information written in. As we've talked about, relying on your mother or your brother or sister or someone to remember what time of day you were born is inherently risky. As we've shown, memory is not always accurate. So that's really your second choice if you absolutely can't find it. Now, of course, there are always feel really sad for people that were either adopted or say their parents have died or something like that, and they just can't actually get those details. There are people that are specialists in chart rectification. I am not one. I actually believe it's a highly specialized thing to do in astrology. and I always refer my clients elsewhere for it. I have actually studied it at diploma level, and it is so fiddly and tricky. So I would always refer out to an expert. But there are techniques in astrology that can help you get a lot more specific. And there's lots of different techniques they use, but one of the big ones is getting you to list 10 to 15 life events. And then we look at your solar arcs, which is a type of astrology that ages your chart based on how old you are. And what they then do is it's kind of hard to explain to someone that's a newbie astrologer, but they look at whether those major life events line up with solar arcs activating angles in your chart. And you can actually get specific down to the minute of birth based on that. And I was just doing one like a few days ago, again, for an assignment, not because I actually do them professionally, for my astrology diploma. And one of my clients had both of her parents die in the same year. And I was actually able to find that if we varied her birth time by a couple of minutes, that when her parents died, it lined up with solar arc Saturn conjunct her IC angle, like
Wow.
almost exactly. So
Yeah.
that's where there are techniques that can actually get super precise down to the minute, but
Yeah.
you want to go to a specialist to do that. It's not something that just any astrologer should be doing. It's a highly
Yeah.
specialized skill.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like,
Mm.
yeah, a lot of work goes into rectification for charts, and it's, yeah, definitely seek out someone who specializes in that. If that is you who's listening and you have no idea about your time of birth, or you just really want to get clear on your astrology chart, that's definitely a good option to get a rectified chart. So, Kath,
Yeah.
let's chat about your Business Astrology Oracle Deck. I'm so keen to share this with our listeners. So tell us all about your deck.
So I came on when I self-published this deck onto your podcast to talk about it. And since then, so I even looked at a blog I wrote like around the time. I was like, oh, maybe I'll look for a publisher in the future. But, I decided to go for the path of least resistance at the time, which was just self-publishing myself. And then like amazing sequence of events happened. The timing, I guess, was kind of perfect because we were just coming out of COVID world. Supplies of materials around the world were opening up again, and some of the publishers that had stopped publishing decks for a while were looking for decks to publish. And I have a friend who's a Hay House author, and she was just like, Kath, do you want me to recommend you to my editor? And I'm like, of course I do, sure. And it all just like synchronistically happened. So I signed a contract with Hay House about 18 months ago. Traditional publishing is a very long process, just if anyone's wondering. Every single card has been redesigned with a professional designer. I had self-designed all my cards in the first deck, new packaging, the whole guidebook had to get fully edited. Like, it was this really massive project. And yeah, we're finally here. We're about to open up pre-orders, and yeah, I mean, next year I'm going to be able to send out decks to my students, and I'm just, yeah, so excited about it.
It is so exciting.
Yeah.
Like, it was seeing it, your journey. Like, I remember when your Business Astrology Oracle came out, like when you self-published, and I like literally like jumped onto my computer, like the minute it was launched, I was like, oh, I've got to get this deck. Like, I was probably one of the first people to buy it. And I was like, so good. And then, yeah, just watching your whole journey, like to getting it traditionally published has been so amazing to watch. So I guess about your deck, so it's a Business Astrology deck. So can you tell us a bit about the cards that are inside the deck?
Yeah, so it's similar to other astrology decks in some ways, in that it covers the things that typical astrology decks cover, which will be cards for the signs and the houses and the planets, all of that sort of thing. But where it differs is that the interpretations and the meaning of the signs and the planets and the houses, etc., are very much specific to business astrology. So it's very much my framework to business astrology in a box, basically. So, for example, the houses in natal astrology, they represent 12 different domains of life. Things like, home and family and community and what's something else, like expansion and travel. Well, in business astrology, we have to kind of interpret them a little bit differently, obviously to be less personal and more about a business. So the cards in the deck, the first house in the Business Astrology Oracle Deck is about your business brand and how your business visually shows up in the world. The sixth house in the Business Astrology Oracle Deck is about day-to-day work and routine. It's about your team members, staff, just all of the things that need to happen in the business day-to-day. So it's just really specific to a business rather than to a person per se. And it's written for soulful and creative entrepreneurs. It's written for this new wave of digital entrepreneurs that really want to have a feminine, intuitive, soulful business, that are interested in astrology as well. And they really are looking for a deck that's going to support them to tune in to the astrological cycles better, to understand their business chart better, because you can use the cards to decode your business chart as well. So yeah, it's just a really amazing tool.
It absolutely is. One of my favorite ways to use your deck is I pull a card from it every week as I'm planning out my week ahead, and it just helps me tune into the energy of what I need to focus in on my business for the week. So, and I also love the spreads that you have in the guidebook, and I'm hoping that they're in your new guidebook as well.
Yeah.
Yay! And so, yeah, those are some really good ways to use the deck. But what are other ways that people might be able to use your deck?
Yeah, so there's heaps of different things. And over the next few months, I'm going to be doing some different trainings, and I'm going to be introducing some different ways to use the deck. But I guess first and foremost, it was created as a tool for my business astrology certification students. So it was created as a learning tool to help them embed the knowledge. So if you can understand, if someone's learnt natal astrology, and then now you're having to interpret the houses differently, these cards, just even if you just picked one each day or one each week, like you're talking about, they just help integrate and embed how to apply it to business astrology. So it was a learning tool to begin with. It's also a tool that if people are wanting to understand the different placements in their chart, so if they have Mars in Cancer in the 12th house, they can pull the Mars card, the Cancer card, the 12th house card, and kind of tune into the energy of them together to help them really, just really tune into their placements and understand their placements better. You can do business planning spreads with them. So one of the things that I will be coming out with either late this year or early next year is I'm going to have some additional spreads for like business planning, solar returns, some of those types of things as well. So you can absolutely.
That's exciting.
Yeah. So it's just going to be a little bonus that I'll be coming out with. So I like to, again, just pick a card each day to I've just found that picking a card each day, whatever deck you're picking, but especially with the Business Astrology Oracle Deck, it's just a really lovely way. Even if you just take 5 minutes, just slow down, tune in, listen to your intuition, get grounded. And that's another thing that I think this deck is great for, to start your work day.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's a
But
beautiful idea.
I've heard of clients and students doing all sorts of different things with them, to inform branding or whatever. I just think that the uses are kind of just limited by your imagination, really.
Yeah, that's so true. Yes. Oh, so exciting. So Kath, would you like to pull a card to share with our listeners today?
Oh, let's just give them a bit of a shuffle. This is a very, I've only had this deck for maybe a week, so it hasn't really been properly shuffled yet. I'm being very careful with it so that it's all pristine for when we have photos taken.
Yes, true. Just shuffle gently.
Yes, shuffle gently. All right. So I'm just going to tune in, and I'm just asking that I'm guided to pick the card that will most support your audience and people listening to this recording. All right, so I've just cut the deck. Sometimes when I'm just picking one card, I will just cut the deck. So I just hover my hands over, and when I feel called, I then bring my fingers together, and wherever my fingers grab the deck is kind of where I cut it, and I just lift up, and then I pick the next card that is on top. Oh, beautiful. So I picked 10th house and recognition, which is kind of a lovely, God, hard to see with this light. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Beautiful. Wow.
This card, the woman is an older looking woman. We did try and make this deck very diverse in terms of body shapes, ages, all of that sort of thing. And the 10th house, the Capricorn energy, which rules the 10th house, is a grandfather or grandmother energy. So I wanted an older woman representing the fact that the 10th house is really about, career peaks and pinnacles. I think of Capricorn energy of like the old patriarchal like presidents and prime ministers that often seem to be like old men by the time they're leaders. So it's this older, wiser energy. And the 10th house in business astrology rules recognition. It's also about the path of least resistance in your business. So it's a good one to look at in terms of what would be the most easeful way for me to gain recognition in my business. So if you like, I'll just read the affirmation that goes along with that card. So the affirmation, and this is quite a personal one for me. It's definitely something that I struggle with at times, but it is safe for my business to be known and visible. Because I think a lot of women actually do have visibility fears on so many different levels. And so this card is all about really like showing up and being seen and claiming your right to be recognized.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I feel that's like really fitting with like, your journey to like publishing and like getting your deck out there into the world. So that's a beautiful card to kind of end our call with. But before I let you go, one last question. When can people get your deck and where can they get it from?
So pre-orders open on October 1st, 2024. The deck will start shipping. It does vary a bit depending on where in the world you are. So the deck will start shipping in UK and Europe and the US on the 31st of December. If you are an Aussie, it will ship on the 7th of January. Now that difference is just because we all take our holidays at that time. And so a lot of the, I guess, people distributing decks and stuff, I don't know. It's just when they're on holidays. So it's a week later in Australia. So by early January, you'll have your deck. There are a whole lot of pre-order bonuses. So I'll give you the link that you can share with your audience about those. So there's going to be a number of bonuses if you do pre-order before the 30th of December. Definitely worth getting in on those bonuses. And in terms of where to buy, so if you're an Aussie, the easiest place is to from the pre-order page, click the Amazon logo. That will take you to Amazon Australia, where you'll be able to order it. I did do a bit of Googling yesterday. There are other places. So I know that the Nile Australian bookstore site is stocking it. And I like over time, more and more places will stock it. But I would say that Amazon is probably the easiest one for Aussies. If people are listening from other parts of the world, we have like Barnes and Noble, we have Indigo and some other international bookstores for both the US and UK on the pre-order page as well. But there's actually going to be a lot of different places that are stocking it, which is super exciting. And it's also getting published in Spanish in future as well. That's a little way off, probably 12 to 18 months away, but it's been picked up by a Spanish publisher as well.
So exciting. Wow, that's amazing. So I'll make sure that all the links are in the show notes below so everyone can click through and pre-order and get those special bonuses as well. Super exciting. So any parting words to end our episode with today, Kath?
No, I think I just really want to highlight that, yeah, doing the work up front to get as specific as you can with the timing for your chart is important. I think where possible, yeah, do it first, because it can be a real identity crisis, as you've experienced, as I've experienced. Like which is why when clients come to me and they don't know their birth time, I'm generally very hesitant to do a reading for them, because I then feel like I'm contributing to this future identity crisis they might have. So do the work to find the data that you can, and absolutely, please, if you don't know your birth time and you want someone to narrow it down, consult a professional rectification specialist. I absolutely, there's things that you and I can do, Kyra, to just double check fairly accurate birth times. But if you really don't know the time, just spend a few $100s to get a rectification specialist to get as close as you possibly can. It really, it's just really worthwhile doing, and you won't regret spending the money to have that level of assurance on your chart.
Yeah, absolutely. To get that peace of mind to know that your chart is correct and that, yeah, you're not setting yourself up for that future identity crisis for sure.
Just that, astrology is the most amazing roadmap for your life and for your business. So, it's absolutely worth diving in. If you're thinking about it, if you're astro curious, definitely it's been the most amazing thing in my life, and yours as well. So
Yes.
really recommend people dive in.
Yes, 100%. Well, thank you so much, Kath, for being a guest on the Moon Manifesting podcast. Again, it's been a pleasure to have you back the second time round. And for everyone else who's listening, stay magical, stay manifesting, and stay tuned. I'll be back with another episode soon. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Moon Manifesting podcast. If you are curious about working with the moon, you can read my book, Moon Manifesting, or join us inside the Moon Manifesting Coven. You'll find the links in the show notes, or go to kyrahowearth.com.